Story 1. This story is about something that happened to my family when we moved into a house in a quiet suburban neighborhood a few years ago. We were all excited to settle into this new home, a 2-story house with a huge backyard and a peaceful vibe. The price was good, the area was great, and the house itself seemed perfect. But we had no idea what we were getting ourselves into. It started the first night we moved in. I was still unpacking in the living room when I heard footsteps upstairs. The house was empty except for my family, and I knew no one else had come by. At first, I thought it was just the house settling. Old houses make noise, right? But then I heard the footsteps again, and they weren't just random creaks. They were distinct, like someone walking around up there, I told my parents, but they brushed it off as me being nervous about the new place. So I let it go. At least until things got stranger. A few nights later, I was woken up in the middle of the night by the sound of something scratching at my bedroom door. I thought it was just the wind or maybe an animal outside. But the scratching continued, persistent and loud, almost as if someone was trying to get in. I got up to check, but when I opened the door, there was nothing there. I chalked it up to my imagination, but the eerie feeling didn't go away. Over the next few days, things started happening more frequently. Doors that would slam shut on their own, lights flickering without reason, and strange cold spots in certain rooms. One afternoon, I was sitting in the living room when I heard a whispering voice coming from upstairs. It was soft at first, like someone talking just out of earshot. I called out, thinking it was my little sister, but there was no answer. I climbed the stairs, and as soon as I stepped onto the second floor, the whispering stopped. The air felt thick, like I was walking through something heavy. I walked down the hallway to my sister's room, thinking maybe she was playing some sort of prank. But when I opened the door, she was asleep, completely unaware of the noise. The worst part came a week after we moved in. I was alone at home one evening, sitting in the living room. I heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps again, but this time they were coming down the stairs. My heart stopped as I realized there was no one else in the house. I ran to the front door, but as I reached it, I saw something in the corner of my eye, a shadow moving in the hallway. I turned around, and standing at the top of the stairs was a figure. It was dark, its shape indistinct, but I could feel its presence. My body went cold, and I couldn't move. I stood frozen as the figure slowly descended the stairs, its footsteps unnervingly slow, dragging each step. It was like it was coming for me. I screamed and bolted out of the house, not caring about anything but getting away. I didn't go back inside until my parents came home. When I told them what happened, they were skeptical, but they couldn't explain the strange occurrences either. After that night, things didn't improve. Every time I was alone in the house, I could feel the presence of something watching me. I started having vivid nightmares of a shadowy figure standing in the hallway, just staring at me. I tried to ignore it, thinking it was all in my head, but it was clear that something wasn't right. We eventually moved out of the house, and the strange occurrences stopped immediately. I never found out who or what was haunting that place, but I know I'll never forget the feeling of being watched, especially from the moment I stepped foot inside. Story 2. This story is about what happened to my friend Lily when she and her family moved into an old house in a small town. The house was beautiful on the outside, with a charming front porch and large windows that let in a lot of natural light. It was a little outdated, but Lily's parents saw its potential and decided to buy it. The first few days in the house were fine. They unpacked, arranged the furniture, and spent time getting to know the new space. But there was one part of the house that always gave Lily a strange feeling: the attic. It was large and musty, filled with old furniture and boxes from the previous owners. There was one thing, however, that caught her eye: an old, ornate mirror tucked away in the corner. It wasn't a particularly large mirror, but it had a thick, carved wooden frame, and it seemed out of place in the dusty attic. It was as if someone had left it there intentionally, forgotten over time. Lily's curiosity got the better of her, and she decided to bring the mirror down into her room. She cleaned it up and hung it on her bedroom wall, thinking it would add a vintage touch to the room. But as soon as she did, things started to change. That night, after Lily went to bed, she woke up to the sound of whispering. At first, she thought it was just the wind, but it didn't stop. The whispers seemed to come from the direction of the mirror. She got up to check, but when she looked into the mirror, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Still, the whispers continued, soft and indistinct. She shook it off and tried to go back to sleep, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Over the next few nights, things escalated. Lily began having vivid nightmares where she was trapped in a dark room, unable to move, with the mirror staring at her from across the room. The whispers grew louder, and sometimes she would wake up to see her reflection moving on its own, as if it had a life of its own. One night, in a moment of desperation, Lily decided to cover the mirror with a blanket. She thought maybe, if she couldn't see it, the strange things would stop. But that night, something worse happened. She woke up to the sound of footsteps in her room. At first, she thought it was just her parents checking on her, but when she looked around, the room was empty. The footsteps stopped, and everything went quiet. But when Lily turned to look at the mirror, still covered with the blanket, it was gone. The blanket was now lying neatly on the floor, and the mirror was nowhere to be found. Terrified, she checked the rest of the house. The mirror was in the attic again, exactly where she had found it. Lily didn't know how it had gotten there, but she knew she couldn't keep it in the house any longer. The energy around it felt wrong, and she was convinced it was somehow connected to the strange happenings. The next day, Lily's family decided to get rid of the mirror. They took it to a local antiques shop and sold it. After that, the house felt normal again. The whispers stopped, the nightmares faded, and the feeling of being watched went away. To this day, Lily has no idea where the mirror ended up or who bought it. She never told her parents the full extent of what had happened in her room, but she always wonders. What if the mirror found its way into someone else's life, and they were the next ones to experience the strange, haunting whispers? Story 3. This is a story about a couple, Sarah and Mark, who moved into a house they had bought together. It was an old house, full of character, with beautiful wooden floors and a cozy feel. The price was a steal, and they were thrilled to start their new life there. They spent their first few days unpacking, painting the walls, and getting comfortable in their new space. However, there was one part of the house that made them both uneasy. A small, unassuming door in the basement. It was located behind a stack of old boxes, and Sarah noticed it on the first day. The door was solid, with no windows or obvious handles, and it was painted a dark shade of green, almost blending into the walls. There was no keyhole, no lock, and no obvious way to open it. Sarah mentioned it to Mark, but they both shrugged it off as just part of the house's charm. Maybe it led to a small storage area or something they didn't need to worry about. But every time they were in the basement, they both noticed the door. It lingered in the back of their minds, like something was trying to draw them toward it. A week after moving in, Sarah was alone in the basement, organizing some boxes, when she heard the door creak. She froze, her heart racing. There was no one else in the house, and yet the sound of the door moving seemed too real to be imagined. She walked over to the door, hesitant, and tried pushing it open. But it wouldn't budge. It felt like something was pushing back from the other side, as if it was locked by an invisible force. That night, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Mark didn't believe her when she told him about the door, thinking she was just tired from all the unpacking, but Sarah was determined to figure it out. The next morning, Sarah went back to the basement, feeling a strange compulsion to try the door again. She tried every possible way to open it, pulling, pushing, even banging on the wood, but it wouldn't open. Then, as she was about to give up, she heard a faint whisper behind her. She spun around, but the basement was empty. The whisper wasn't clear, but it sounded like something was calling her name softly. Sarah's heart raced as she backed away from the door. That's when she noticed something strange. There was a faint scratch mark on the floor in front of the door, like something had been dragging across it from the other side. Panicked, Sarah ran upstairs to get Mark. When they returned together, the door was still in the same position. Mark, still skeptical, grabbed a crowbar from the garage and tried to pry the door open. But no matter how much force he used, the door remained sealed shut. They decided to ignore it for the time being. But that night, things got even worse. Sarah woke up to the sound of the door creaking again, this time louder, like something on the other side was scraping at it. She felt the cold air seeping from the basement through the cracks in the floorboards. Mark was still asleep, and she didn't want to wake him, so she went downstairs alone. When she reached the basement door, she was horrified to find it slightly ajar. The whispering was clearer now, and it was calling her name again, louder and more insistent. Something on the other side wanted her to open the door. With trembling hands, Sarah pushed the door open, expecting to see nothing but darkness. But what she saw froze her in place. There was nothing in the room, nothing except for a dark, empty space. But the floor was covered in strange, cryptic symbols that weren't there before. The walls were scratched, as if someone had been clawing at them from the inside. The AIR in the basement felt heavier, oppressive, and Sarah couldn't breathe properly. She stumbled back, slamming the door shut and bolting it from the inside. She ran upstairs, terrified, and told Mark everything. The next day, they packed their things and left the house, not wanting to know what lay behind that door. To this day, they don't know what was on the other side of it, or if anyone else has tried to open it since. The house was sold to a new family shortly after they left, but no one knows what happened to that door, or the strange, haunting whispers that came with it.